Hello, welcome to installment number 2 of Outermost Uncle. This is where I read my blog to you so you don't have to. But you can find my blog at outermostuncle.com. Here I'm going to share a little bit more than I do there. There will be more audio and a few other things. So that is, if that lens stays on that camera, because I'm shooting this through a Cold War era Russian lens, and the fine engineering that they had, that lens just might fall off. Like my Kiev 60 right there. If I pick that up and I'm not careful, that prism just falls off. And honestly, I think it was engineered like that. I think, anyway, enough of that. All right, so installment number 2. My parents lived in the same house in Southeast Michigan for almost 60 years. It was the house I grew up in. Over the course of the final 10 years they lived there, my visits increased as their needs increased. I live in Western Washington, and my sister was always there for them, but I'd show up now and then to give her a break. There was a period of time I would extract a big box of stuff from either the large hallway cupboards, the drawers below it, or maybe the attic. My mom would comment on the things as I pulled them out of each box. The real attic was filled with shredded newspaper insulation by this time, but the place we called the attic was a small space off the upstairs bedroom on the east side of the house. It was dusty and rarely visited, and that's where I found my Uncle Bill's slides. They were in a metal box covered with crumbling insulation and other stuff. There were a few prints there as well, and I brought them downstairs. My mom and I sat at our table near the window that overlooks the lake. It's really a pond. As I held the slides to the light, I asked her about him, and she wasn't showing too much interest. We moved on to funner memorabilia. Why she kept some of the stuff she kept, I'll never know. There were scrapbooks and letters, old greeting cards, we kids' elementary school records. In a pile that wasn't nearly as old, I found a letter to my mom from Dick Palmer, one of my Uncle Bill's childhood friends. Written in 2008, he'd remarked on some newsy stuff. Then there was this, quote, "Sometimes I wonder if the rest of your clan ever wonders if Bill may still be around and living incognito somewhere. I don't any longer think about it often, but I do still recall the last time I saw him in Archbold that he mentioned that sometimes people simply disappeared, never to be heard from again." End quote. Rekindling the Bill conversation, I read it to my mom, and she promptly knocked Dick's idea down. She didn't believe anything of the sort. My grandmother had had a hard time getting information about the disappearance. The sources that be had trouble understanding that the incident took place on San Salvador Island in the Bahamas, not San Salvador, El Salvador. It was very frustrating, and she eventually contacted the local newspaper, the Archbold Buckeye. A reporter there contacted his state representative, and they were able to obtain confirmation of Uncle Bill's death. My parents went to bed early. Sometimes I'd meet up with friends downtown, but more often I'd go upstairs and sip a little bourbon and mess around with all the stuff I found in the boxes. Bill's prints were 8x10s of tropical places. They were mostly color images, though a few black and whites were taken with infrared film. I started going through Bill's slides. The images were all over the board. Some were apparently taken in various places in the U.S., some were in tropical locales, some were seemingly nondescript cities. The photos of people intrigued me. This mystery woman shows up in several of Bill's photographs. But who were these people? How did a kid from Ohio make his way to these places, temperate and tropical? Late night pondering led to late night phone scrolling. My first hit was a bit from the Buckeyes' Golden Notes of Archbold's Memorable Past from July 7th, 2008. And it was a little bit, it said 50 years ago. Wednesday, July 2nd, 1958. William Scales, 25. Is reported missing off the shore of San Salvador in the Caribbean Sea. William and a friend went skin diving offshore in coral reefs. They failed to return. 3 weeks ago, he visited his mother in Archbold. He was employed by the RCA Service Company, tracking missiles fired from Cape Canaveral, Florida, downrange into the Caribbean Sea. My niece was later able to get some audio of my mother speaking about her brother.
He finally decided what he wanted to do. He just couldn't seem to find himself. He was in charge of a station on the what they call downrange for the missile rocket testing things, where they fire them downrange, and he had a station supposed to be tracking them. He had been in the Army. That's where he got involved in this a little bit, but he had always been interested in scientific stuff. And because he had the background of working with government projects, and he was hired on by, well, it was the government, but the government was working through RCA at the time. So he worked for RCA, but he had really worked for the government, and he had enjoyed doing that. It was a bunch of really young guys having a grand time down there doing what they were supposed to do, and very, very bright engineers, of course. And they had a lot of time to be on the beaches, of which there were many. They visited the various islands. He had all kinds of souvenirs that he brought back. The big steel drums that you bang on like this, and a lot of other things. And he finally decided that if he stayed down there, he was just going to be a beach bum. He decided what he was going to do, and he made plans to come home. He boxed everything up and got his ticket and everything, and then he and a buddy went one last time out with scuba gear. They love to go underwater, and he'd taken a lot of pictures there too. He's a staffer, and so they went out one last time, and they didn't come back, and they were never found. They disappeared into the sea.